Yeah, okay, please, please, could you please start? Please, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Kindly, if my internet or my audio is not coming through well, somebody just send a message or just unmute yourself and let me know so that I may make the necessary adjustments. Allow me to first of all begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to Kai and the Rohingya Academic Research Program for inviting me to this particular lecture session. When Kai reached out to me to come and give this lecture, I first of all was a little bit hesitant because I've seen the amount of work he has put in the training. I've seen the kind of commitment he has been putting. And over the last 3 months, my schedules have been quite busy. And I was wondering how I'll be able to manage, not just to prepare for this lecture, but to also deliver it in a manner that will have an impact to the audience. But in the course of the week, we had some good communication, and I became more and more confident that this was going to be possible. And here we are. Personally, I'm a Kenyan citizen, and I consider myself a friend of the Rohingya community. I've, over the years, embedded myself within the Rohingya networks in countries where I've been, and I've got to learn a lot about the Rohingya people, which, in my opinion, is a story of great resilience and dedication. And more specifically, I'm even more grateful that there is a much higher level of commitment when it comes to academics. And I've seen the level in which the Rohingya people who have engaged with in the past year, the level of dedication they have when it comes to academics, but even more importantly, in their attempts to tell their own story, to tell the Rohingya story to the rest of the world. So for me, when it comes to an opportunity to give a lecture, to give a talk, I'm not going to call this on a lecture per se, because I'll try to base my lecture on the experiences that I've had myself as a researcher. And so that will be the basis of my presentation. So I'll give a presentation and then I'll open up the floor for a couple of questions and answers. So the aim of this particular presentation is to give you an overview of research methodology. And here, I know that some of you are already in, I don't want to call the participants emerging researchers per se, because I've seen the amount of work you have been putting in as students of research methodology. And I think eventually you will become some of the leading researchers we will have, not just in Myanmar, but in the broader region. So my goal is to give an overview, and that overview here means that we may not be able to cover everything around research methodologies, but we can pick 1, 2, or 3 important areas that are worth mentioning. I don't know if there will be some things that we may need to cover in the coming days, months, or weeks. I'll be more than happy to return again and give an additional lecture, because research methodology is really a broad field. And so today we will just have an overview of this particular topic. And in that case, what I will do is to give you a highlight of the importance of methodology. I will also talk about the types of methodology, the strategies you can use to select the right methodology, the techniques used in data collection, as well as how somebody can analyze the data they have collected. But more importantly here is that we will give just an overview of these issues in about 20 or 30 minutes, and then I'll open the floor for Q&A. As I've said, I'll be more than happy to communicate or get in touch with somebody who may need additional explanation of something that I may mention during my presentation that does not come out clearly. I will also be, as I've said, happy to honor another invitation to come and speak to you. So the session is particularly ideal for anybody who wants to engage in writing an academic thesis, write an academic journal, as well as any other academic related publication. Remember that when it comes to research, we have different types of research that somebody can conduct. You can conduct an academic research, you can conduct a social research, you can conduct research on behalf of the government, so that it's not necessarily an academic research, but it's a research intended to inform government policy, among other things. So these different types of research that you can conduct might also require different type of methodology or approach. So this one is specifically ideal for those who are interested in academic related research. So I know you've already covered this, but let's just begin from what we know and then slowly try to tackle what we do not know. So what is a research methodology? Because this is a terminology that you may use quite often in your research class or in your research career, but sometimes we do not take a break and try to understand what we mean exactly by research methodology. So in my opinion, I think research methodology refers to the systematic approach and framework somebody uses to conduct research. And I'm using the word systematic here because you can actually conduct a research that is not systematic. And in that case, that particular research may not necessarily meet the requirements that makes that research a good academic research. So there are two words here that are important when you try to define or find out what research methodology is. Number one is that it refers to the systematic approach. And then secondly, it refers to the framework that we use when conducting research. And so based on that definition, you can argue that research involves the methods, the techniques, and the procedures that you as a researcher will use to, number one, collect data, to analyze that data, and be able to interpret the data so that you can come up with some sort of recommendation. So in this case, methodology is important to the extent that it helps you as a researcher collect good quality data. And remember that a good research is as good as the data that you have collected. So collecting the data, analyzing that data, and interpreting the data itself is what methodology is all about. So when you begin to have interest in writing a book, a thesis, or a research document, three things must begin to preoccupy your mind even before you start writing. Number one, how and where am I going to collect the data? In other words, what kind of data am I going to use in this particular topic that I'm going to write on? Number two, you need to then ask yourself, once I have collected that data, how will I analyze the data itself? That's important because you may collect good quality data, but if that data cannot be interpreted or analyzed well, then you will lose the value of that particular data. So analysis of the data, then once you've analyzed the data, you want to also accurately interpret that data. Okay, and those are the things that research methodology helps you to do. In addition, research methodology will ensure three things are achieved. Number one, that the research we are conducting is valid. Okay, because sometimes some people may do research, but then you find that the impact of that research is inconsequential. In other words, what I'm saying is that you don't want to conduct a research that may not in any way bring change or impact the way your society lives or the experiences which your society is going through. So you want to conduct a valid research, one that if anybody looks at it will say, this is a good timely topic. It's worth spending time to read it. Because again, in the field of research, you may conduct research and then if you try to ask somebody, okay, well, I have a book here, would you like to read it? You can see from the response of the person you're asking that they are not necessarily interested in that particular research because it's not valid. So research methodology will help you identify timely issues that are worth spending time to conduct research on and that are likely to attract a group of audience to read them. Number two, research methodology helps to ensure that the research you're conducting is reliable. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. We are living in a very dangerous period in the world, a period of information warfare, a period of fake news, a period of basically manipulation of information. And so sometimes I see even PhD holders, I see people with master's degrees, sometimes bachelor degree holders, but as well as people who have not gone to the university, falling victims of this information warfare. In other words, somebody can conduct a research that is not reliable, but the audience who he or she is targeting are not able to identify that this particular research is not reliable, and they will go ahead and consume this particular information without asking any questions. So at the end of the day, you find that even you yourself, despite your education background, you may end up spreading information that is not true or reliable. So you don't want to be part of this generation of individuals who are generating information that is not reliable, that is not truthful. And so you can only manage to conduct a good, reliable research if the methodology is also correct. The third thing that the methodology does, what methodology is that it helps you to have a replicable research. In other words, if you can conduct a study on the role of identity in the Rohingya crisis today, your findings might also be useful in a society such as Kenya, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and other places. People in those countries should be able to replicate or borrow the framework or theory that you have developed, or even the findings that you have developed, and apply them in other places. So when you're conducting research, you can say, okay, well, for me, I'm only interested in conducting research on the Rohingya problem. Remember that the findings of those studies might actually also save lives in other parts of the world. And so you need to make sure that the methodology you're using is one that is useful, that is valid, that is reliable, and that can be replicated in other societies or other settings. So that's again an importance of methodology, which I'm sure you're now familiar with. So if somebody asks me, okay, can you outline what methodology is in terms of what I can talk about when it comes to the definition of methodology? So you can tell the person that methodology is basically everything. It is all about the research design. It's all about how the data collection will be done. It's about how the data that has been collected will be analyzed. And remember that ultimately, the findings, the conclusions of your study, and even the recommendations that you're going to give whenever you conduct a research are going to be pegged on these three things. The type of data you've collected. So for example, if somebody goes and collects outdated or obsolete data, and say, well, I'm very busy conducting my research on the Rohingya problem, but you're collecting outdated information, then you may actually conclude your research, you can make recommendations, but those recommendations might not necessarily have an impact on the current experiences that people are having, either in Kenya, in Myanmar, or in other parts of the world. So in short, methodology is that important. The right methodology is everything you need as an emerging researcher. Once you master the art of methodology, everything else will be very simple, because whatever you'll be writing as a researcher will be valid, will be reliable, and will be replicable. Okay, so those are the things that methodology will help you to achieve, and those are the things that you as an emerging researcher wants to pursue. So that's what methodology is about. It's about everything. It's about the research design, data collection, and data analysis. But why is it important? Why should you care about methodology? Now, you need to care and take methodology very seriously, because methodology helps you to clearly outline your research problem and to come up with the right research objectives. In other words, again, if some of you will, in the future, intend to apply for a master's degree scholarship, or for a PhD degree scholarship, for a research grant, because some of you may say, okay, well, for me, I'm already done with my PhD, or I'm not interested with doing a master's and a PhD. What I want is to apply for a research grant from an international organization or a local organization, and say they are giving about $100,000 for someone to conduct research on the role of identity in peace and security. What will make your proposal or study stand out is if you have clear research problems and research objectives. Those are the main issues that a scholar, a person who's looking for research grants, must be able to master in order to be able to succeed in competing not just locally but also internationally. Because at the end of the day, most of these academic grants, opportunities that come with academics, may give importance to somebody's situation or circumstance. Somebody can say, okay, well, this applicant is from a conflict region, so we may need to take their application seriously. But that is a very small portion of what the people who are willing to give money will be looking at. What they will be looking at is whether the research you're proposing to conduct has a clear research problem and has a clear and precise research objective. And this, even for you as a researcher, is very important, because it will allow you to break down what is rather a big problem into small issues that can be studied. For example, if somebody says, well, I want to find a solution to the problem in Arakan State, or among the Rohingya people, or even among Kenyans, if you're here in Kenya like myself, we have very many problems. That is the reality. One research, one study cannot solve all our problems. So sometimes what we need to do is to break down our problems into smaller parts that we can research and find conclusions and recommendations on. If we do not do that and say, okay, well, for me, I'm only interested in dealing with a broader problem that is facing my people, then you'll be biting more than you can chew. So you need the research methodology to help you come up with clear research problems and objectives for that particular study. And that is after breaking the problem into different parts and then finding the solutions for these smaller parts, rather than trying to find a solution to a big problem without breaking it into parts. So that's one importance of methodology. But the second one, which is what I've just talked about in the previous slides, is that methodology defines the methods and technique of gathering relevant, but now I'm adding the word accurate data. There is nothing more important for an academician than accurate data. I remember we have had this debate many times, even with my friends who are very close to politicians. Some of them are very close to the government. And whenever we talk about the problems facing our people, whether it's in Kenya, in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, accurate data is very, very important. And unfortunately, sometimes we who study conflict and political science in general end up becoming very emotional sometimes. Sometimes we lose meaning when it comes to conducting research because we are emotional, because we hate somebody, or we hate another country, or we hate another group of people. So when we are conducting our research, we don't come up with accurate information. And sometimes this is very intentional, because just you want your study to come up with certain conclusions. unfortunately for us as academicians, we are expected to come up with accurate information at all times, even if that accurate information may be placing blame on ourselves or may require that me and my people change the way we are doing things, which is something that, unfortunately, when you're conducting research around conflict, not just in Myanmar, but if you talk about the Kurdish problem, if you talk about the Uyghur problem, if you talk about the Palestinian problem, if you talk about the Ukrainian crisis, if you talk about the many conflicts that are going on across the world, in many cases, people are very emotional and they don't want any research or output that is likely to, again, disapprove what they believe in. Because some of this information, you pick them from the television, from your friends or some relatives that have been telling you about these issues. For us as scientists, our role is to come up with accurate information. And that accurate information is what is likely to make our situation change. Because if you pretend that you don't want to know the truth about why you are in the situation you're in currently, then as a generation, we may end up losing the opportunity to address the real reasons why we find ourselves in such situation. So the importance of methodology here is it will help you to gather relevant and accurate information, which then you will use to come up with intelligent and accurate recommendations to the problems that you're trying to solve. And you can remember that those of you around in 2020 during the COVID-19, at the beginning, there was a lot of denial of what is happening. People did not want to talk about what the disease was about. People did not want to rely on accurate information. Ultimately, people were forced to rely on accurate information to be able to solve the COVID-19 problem. Otherwise, we could have been now suffering the problem from COVID-19 up to now. In addition, research methodology also helps us to determine whether a study will require qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method design. As I'm saying, some of these things you need to have them even before you start conducting your research. You need to determine in advance, am I going to conduct a study that is based on qualitative research design? Will my study require a quantitative approach, or do I need a mixed method design? I'll talk about these three in a few minutes. It will also help you, and this is another important aspect of methodology, it will help you to determine whether your study or your research will be exploratory or descriptive or explanatory, depending on the goals that you have with your study. So sometimes people just conduct study without taking into account whether the design of the study will be descriptive or explanatory or exploratory, where you want to just examine a particular phenomena or a problem, or whether in terms of the finding and presentation of your data, you're going to rely on descriptive research design, just to give an overview in brief of what is happening, or whether you need an explanatory research design where you need to now give a lot of details in terms of the situation that is on the ground and what you're conducting the research on. So these are important issues that you must take into account. At the beginning, you may find it a little bit difficult checking these boxes because they are actually boxes that you need to check before coming up with before you begin conducting your research. But over time, you'll just become an expert, so that once you think about a topic, you'll just have these things already in your mind, and you'll have no problem coming up with the right research design, coming up with the right research problem, coming up with the right research objectives, coming up with the right data collection tool, etc. Furthermore, you can also argue that a well-structured methodology helps to incorporate checks to guarantee that the data you are collecting is reliable, valid, and free of bias. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. The need for you to have information that is not biased. As I've said, It is not surprising, and you cannot blame a researcher who is a bit biased when they are conducting research on conflict, because when you are conducting a research that is directly affecting you, sometimes we don't want to see information that is likely to um, criticize or create an image that is not very positive on our part. What we want to see is information that confirms the things that I believe in. If I believe that the other person is a bad person, then you want to collect information that proves that your enemy is a bad person or is the cause of the problem. Sometimes maybe you are the one who's causing the problem. But this is something that can only be proved if your data is reliable, if it is valid, and if it is away from that, if it is free from any type of bias. So again, you want to make sure that that is happening. Other importance of methodologies include, for example, it helps you to define the appropriate techniques, particularly on data analysis. So what we see very often is once a student or a researcher has a topic, maybe there is conflict in Ukraine, the person is not very happy, he says, I want to write a paper on Ukraine conflict, okay? And then he says, okay, I'm going to collect some information here. I've been watching a lot of news. I think I know the situation on the ground. So this is not a very good way of conducting research because you need to collect, as I've said, reliable and accurate information. And sometimes this accurate information might require that you have insider perspective, somebody who is actually on the other side, giving you information about what is really going on. But even more important, it's not just about collecting the information. It's about how can I be able to analyze this information. So some of these things, sometimes researchers who are emerging tend to ignore them. For example, if somebody is looking at the Ukrainian conflict, and this is just for academic purposes, I'm just using it as an example. If you go to Russia, and I've been in Russia a couple of times, and try to talk to the people there, they'll tell you what is happening in Ukraine is what they call a special military operation. That's how the Russians are describing the operation in Ukraine. It could be true, but that's basically what how they are seeing the conflict. If you come to Ukraine and try to speak to people there, they'll tell you what is going on in Ukraine is an invasion by the Russians on Ukrainian territory. Now, as a researcher, you have two conflicting information. On one side, someone is calling the conflict a special military operation. He doesn't see it as a war or as invasion. But if you go to Ukraine, they don't see this as a special military operation. They see it as a conflict and an invasion against their own sovereignty. So, as a researcher, these are two sets of information that you've collected. Which one is accurate? Okay? The accuracy of this information can only be understood if you properly analyze the information and use other third-party sources to try and confirm whether indeed the situation in Ukraine is a special military operation or it is a war, is an invasion by the Russians. So as a researcher, you cannot just rely on information and say, well, this is what the Russians are saying, and this is what I'm going to write in my study, or this is what the Ukrainians are saying, and therefore this is what I'm going to use as accurate data. No, you need to analyze the information and find which of these two narratives is actually accurate. Now, a transparent and well-documented methodology also allows you as a researcher to replicate the study and ensure that the findings of your studies are reliable and consistent across different contexts. So as I've said, being able to replicate a study, how do you put the findings of your study into the broader context of peace and conflict studies? So even if you're looking at the Rohingya problem, it's not enough to just start and conclude your study focusing only on the Rohingya situation. It is important that you put the situation into a broader context just to make sure that you can be able to replicate your study elsewhere. So try to understand, okay, which other societies have endured more or similar experiences as the Rohingya today. It may be a difficult study to find another replicable situation, but if you are open-minded, you should be able to give some examples that are more or less similar to what is happening in Myanmar, and come up with some context within which we can understand this broader conflict or situation in Rohingya, but among the Rohingya people, but also anywhere else in the world, whether, as I've said, in Kenya or in Indonesia or Madagascar. Your studies must be able to fit in a broader context. Yeah. So don't just say that I'm only looking at the Rohingya situation. I am not interested in what is happening or what happened before elsewhere that could be similar or slightly different from what we are going through. And methodology can actually help you to make that happen. Furthermore, you can argue that research methodology is also a bridge between theory and practice. It links the conceptual framework to the real world process of data collection, data analysis, and data interpretation. So sometimes if you just come up with a study that is not linked with theory and practice, because most of these theories have already been developed. For example, those of you who have been good students of identity and politics, they know that there are several theories of identity that have been developed over time to help us explain conflicts around the world. So there is need for you to find how the case study you're working on fits into these already established theoretical frameworks. And your research methodology then will help you to achieve this goal. Again, there is something that is important here in the last paragraph, that research methodology also helps you to manage limitations and to minimize bias through sample selection, ethical considerations, and control of extraneous variables. Now, this is something that, as researchers, if you'll be writing your thesis, I think in the first chapter in the introduction, you'll be required to write limitations of the study. Many students are not familiar with this subtopic. They wonder what does the limitation of the study mean? What we want to see, or the audience of the thesis want to see, is now that you have selected a topic, what are some of the things that can hinder you from conducting the study successfully? These are the limitations. So if you select the proper methodology, it will help you to avoid certain limitations. For example, if I want to conduct a study, for example, the conflict in Ukraine, and I say, okay, I want to interview some people. Of course, given the current situation in Ukraine, I may not go with some papers and pens interviewing people in the streets, but there's conflict that is going on. So this is not a very good research method. But I can take advantage of a Google survey or some online questionnaire and send it to some people in Ukraine, asking them to respond to a set of questions regarding the conflict. So in this case, even though the conflict can stop me from going physically to the ground to collect information and interview people there, I can select an appropriate methodology that can help me overcome this limitation. So whenever you are gearing up to conduct a study, even if it's about the Rohingya crisis, we know that by now, some people have been displaced, some are in Bangladesh, some are still in Arkan state, others are in Europe. So you cannot talk to all the Rohingya people at the same time. So how do I make sure that I get the opinions of Rohingya people in different parts of the world? So I'll choose a methodology that will allow me to reach out to a wider audience. So don't just limit yourself to the people near you who are also maybe experiencing the same situation. So even if you ask them, they'll just give you the same answers. So try to use the appropriate methodology that can help you broaden your scope on places where you can collect information. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide here because these are things that you are already familiar with. Types of methodology. There are mainly three types of methodology that students or researchers use in conducting research. The first one is the qualitative method, which is particularly common and highly used by emerging researchers, but even advanced researchers still use the qualitative method. So don't shy away and say that, okay, well, I'm not very impressed by the qualitative method. I want to use the more advanced quantitative method. No, even advanced researchers still use qualitative methods. And qualitative methodology is characterized by certain things such as conducting interviews, doing case studies, conducting ethnographical studies. So these are methodological approaches that fall under the qualitative method. But if you're good in mathematics, if you're good in statistics, if you have access to some research tools such as SPSS and others, you may want to conduct a study using quantitative methodology. Now, unfortunately, now this is an important explanation. There is an increased bias among particularly publishers, even in social sciences. They want studies that are being conducted on whether in politics, economics, or conflict to adopt quantitative methodology. They say that this is the best methodology that is more reliable. But in reality, if you're just an emerging researcher, doing studies that are very much quantitative is not very easy. That's the truth. So that's one of the obstacles you're likely to face if you try to publish, especially in high quality journals and forums. But as I've said, if you just study quantitative methodology, it's something that is manageable. Mostly it includes things like using surveys, experiments, and statistical analysis. Again, another common methodological approach is the mixed method approach. This mixed method basically combines qualitative and quantitative method, because we have realized over the years that it is difficult to only rely on one methodology. So say, okay, well, I'm only going to conduct a qualitative study. As I've said, at the early stages of your research, you can rely on qualitative method alone. But over time, as you mature into the field, as you become an expert, you want to also include some elements of quantitative data and quantitative methodology in your study. This is what we call mixed method. Okay. So now that we know the types of methodology, what should I do to know when to use qualitative, when to use quantitative, and when to use mixed methods? In other words, what are the determinants of the right methodology to use as an emerging researcher? Number one, you need to look at the research questions that you intend to answer. If my questions are framed in a manner that requires me to analyze some quantitative data, then I need to conduct a quantitative research study. If the study I'm seeking to conduct requires me to handle or deal with qualitative research or information, then you may just focus on the qualitative research. And if the research questions you intend to answer require a mixed method, then that should guide you appropriately. In short, the research questions you have can actually help you to determine the kind of information you need and whether that information is qualitative or quantitative. Secondly, you need to understand the research context. Yes, this is important. Particularly, the realities about you as a researcher and the place where you're conducting your research. For example, how much resources do you have? Yes, because if you're conducting a survey which may require you to interview or send questionnaires to 10,000 people, clearly an emerging researcher may not be able to, does not have the resources to do that. If the study will require you to observe a particular trend for 15 years, for example, let's say you are observing a particular society and how they interact with each other, and that study requires you to observe that society for 15 years. Again, that's not a research that an emerging researcher may want to conduct because that's just too much time. In addition, you may also be a master's or PhD student on scholarship. You've been given a scholarship for 3 years. 2 years have already gone in 1 year maybe for coursework. You already defended your proposal in the second year. Now you have only 1 year left to conduct a study. It will not be very wise for you to do a study that requires a lot of time. So the context, what kind of study am I conducting? What is the situation that I'm in? If I'm in my second year of my master's program, I don't need to conduct a study that requires too much time. So that will also help you to select the right methodology. Number 3, what are your research goals? What do you intend to achieve with that research? Because conducting research just for the sake of conducting research is really not very helpful. You want to have some goals and objectives while you're conducting a research. And those objectives and goals, for example, if my goal is to educate the Rohingya people, the people living even in the refugee camps or just the normal citizens, I don't want to conduct a quantitative method that includes a lot of mathematics and formulas. The locals will not understand. I need to conduct a qualitative study that the findings of those studies can easily be understood by the locals. So that is something that you want to take into account when selecting your research methodology. The research goals. Why am I conducting this study? Lastly, you need to take into consideration the ethical aspect of your research. And here, your ethical consideration will influence the type of methodology that you will use. For example, if I want to conduct an interview among children, people have not reached the age of 18, I need some information from them, then my methodology, the method I'm going to use, must take into account the fact that I'm dealing with minors, people who are not the age of 18, and therefore I need to take into account some ethical consideration. If I'm going to conduct a study about people who are still having certain traditions and cultures, I should be able to understand the type of questions that I'm going to ask those people. So you cannot go to a society which has certain beliefs about women, certain beliefs about old people, and then start asking them just any question. So your methodology must be guided by ethical consideration. So, as an emerging researcher, what are the real problems that you're likely to face that are likely to stop you from becoming an established researcher or just make it difficult for you to conduct your research? Number 1, you'll face serious challenges in data collection and interpretation. As I've said, if you're conducting research on the Rohingya issue, you want to collect information that is detailed. You also may want to know the thinking of the junta government in the capital city and which or the Burmese army. You want to have some information about how they are viewing the Rohingya people. But that kind of information is not very easy to get because maybe it's okay, why are you asking us these questions? So that can hinder you from getting what I call insider information. Because as I've said, even though the other person is your enemy, as a scientist, you want to collect information from them. You want to know how are they thinking? Why are they behaving the way they do? I don't just assume that you know why they are behaving the way they do. Find some insider information, and that can be a problem. It can be a challenge, and so you will need to overcome that challenge. The second thing is that most of our people, especially emerging researchers, lack the necessary skills. So if I ask how many people know how to use the Python or the SPSS or other tools of data analysis, not very many people are familiar with these tools. So that lack of skills might make it difficult for you to interpret your data in a manner that will be helpful to you and to the audience that will be reading your study. The other challenge is time and resource constraint. You may not have enough money to conduct a decent research because research also sometimes may require you to hire some research assistants, collect data from different parts of the country. If you don't have money and if you don't have time, again, that can be a big problem. So you must anticipate, okay, I'm choosing this topic. Will I need does this topic need a lot of money and resources and time? If it does, drop that topic and pick something that you can be able to do easily. Sometimes you may also have a problem with limited access to equipment. So you may say, okay, for me, I want to collect data, but you don't have the necessary recorders to collect interviews. You don't have the computers. Sometimes somebody is sharing computers. So this can also be a challenge for emerging researchers. But all is not lost, because at the end of the day, there are also some opportunities that you can tap on as an emerging researcher to overcome the potential problems that you're facing. Number one is that you must focus on collaboration. So you could be a Rohingya, based in Myanmar, Bangladesh, or maybe in Europe, and you are interested in conducting research. Why don't you collaborate with other people so that you share the responsibilities, you share the resources? If somebody can also know somebody who you did not know. So this collaboration is something that we encourage emerging researchers to do. If you look at my publications, you'll find I've published with people from Turkey, from Bangladesh, from Ghana, from from the United States, from Nigeria, from all manner of places. So you need to collaborate with other people. Don't just say that this is my own problem. No, there could be somebody who's also interested in the Rohingya issue. The person does not necessarily need to be a Rohingya, but the person can have the resources and therefore solve the problem that I've mentioned in the previous slide. The second thing is that you must be open to learning, joining mentorship programs, which is already what you guys are doing, and I congratulate you for that. You're already part of some sort of mentorship program where you are learning issues around research methodology, etc. So that's a good thing. You may want to encourage your friends to also take advantage of such kind of things. The third thing is that you may need to leverage on free or cost-effective tools of research. Remember that just like a farmer going to the farm, you cannot go to the farm without tools. Yes, if you go to the farm without tools, or if you're a fisherman and you go to the lake without tools to catch the fish, you're not going to do anything. So in research, there are also some tools that you may need to learn and familiarize yourself with, and those tools sometimes can be very expensive. The good news is there are some of these statistical tools that are free, such as the Python, Google Sheets, or R, which are tools that you can use to interpret your data. You may want to avoid some expensive software such as Stata or SPSS as an emerging researcher, but if you have them, this is good news for you. The third thing or the fourth thing is that you also need to look for funding opportunities. Now, research requires funding, and there are people who have made it in life through research funding and grants or scholarships. So don't just say that, okay, well, I want to conduct research on the Rohingya issue, the Rohingya situation, but you're not having the money and resources, but you're also not looking for funding. So try to check around what options are available, what opportunities are available, and take advantage of that. The other thing is that you may want to utilize some university resources, especially if you want to access some articles, some books. And here collaboration is important. So if you're collaborating with somebody who has access to university materials, this can help you to achieve this particular goal. Okay, I can see there's a call for prayer. Actually, that's my last slide. The last point is that you may also want to maximize networking and partnerships. This one is also going to help you as an emerging researcher to achieve or overcome some of the challenges that I mentioned earlier. So I don't know whether what I've covered has added one or two new things, but I know some of this information, you already knew them, but I wanted just to emphasize on them and to reiterate that these are some of the things that you want to take into account as an emerging researcher. Thank you so much. I'll stop there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for this wonderful presentation. it is really fruitful and productive. I had some questions, but in your presentation, it is clear. It's all now. Understand everything very clearly. Thank you for coming here. We would like to see you again in the future.
Hello,
Thank you so
you guys
much.
hear me? Hello?
Hello. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you so much. I think there might be some questions. Yeah, please, Kaiser. Okay, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, sir. Thank you so much, Professor, for your fruitful presentation. Actually, I gained more knowledge about the methodology process in the academic research field. This is an amazing presentation in our institute. Thank you so much for bringing this kind of lecture. So I have a small question about the reliability and consistency. Uh, how can we check the consistency or reliability and ensure the consistency in the qualitative research method? Please answer, please, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, very well. Thank you, Kaiser. That's an amazing question. So, an emerging researcher is conducting a study using the qualitative method. How can that person ensure that the information is reliable and consistent? Now, here you may, because I've said that the qualitative method relies on interviews, isn't it? So you can use three types of interviews. You can have what we call focus group discussions, okay, where you gather, let's say, Rohingya youths, aged between 18 and 35, about 10 or 15 of them, and in a round discussion, what we call a focused group discussion, ask them these questions that you're seeking answers for. Then once you collect information from them, you can then conduct another type of interview, what we call the key informant interview. Now, the key informant here, you're not going to target just the local youths. You want to interview some knowledgeable people in the society or people in positions of authority, let's say local administrators, the local chief. You could interview an academician, for example, who has been conducting interviews, and ask them maybe the same questions and see the kind of responses they're going to give you. Then go to the literature reviews and check out some publications on the same topic or issue and see what were the findings in that particular publication or set of publication. In this case, you'll be having three sets of information. And when you do your analysis, what we call the data analysis, you're likely to see which points are being repeated in these three categories of interviews. And that will help you to have reliable and consistent information. I don't know whether that answers your question, Harrison.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer.
Okay, thank you. Abu, go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, is there any other questions?
Can I ask one more question, please?
Okay, please go ahead. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir. Before I use in the research methodology, I write as both method as quantitative method and qualitative method. But I learn a new thing. This is a mixed method. Can you explain, sir, one example about mixed method?
Yeah, the mixed method basically combines both elements of qualitative and quantitative, not the whole qualitative method, but you borrow something. So, for example, if you're conducting a research, you can then say, okay, some information I'm going to gather them from published documents, whether from government, academic documents, and documents from NGOs, including the World Bank and IMF. This is basically what we call literature review aspect. It's a way of collecting qualitative data. You can also collect some other information through interviews where you try and ask people some questions. And then in addition to that, you can conduct a survey, which is an element of quantitative method, and also use some statistics in order to try and answer this particular question. So at the end of the day, when it comes to your chapter on findings and analysis, you'll use the information from the literature review, from the interview, from the surveys, and from the statistics to make conclusions on your research questions. And in that case, you'll be using the mixed method because you'll be combining elements from the research and the qualitative and quantitative method. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Okay,
I said
sir.
okay. Yeah, I think there's one Muhammad Salim. Okay, please, could you please go ahead?
Hello.
Yeah, we can get you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good evening, sir. I'm Muhammad Salim. I'm from Bangladesh, and I want to know about that. My question is, in a research, I took a topic on ongoing conflict. For example, no ongoing in Gaza conflict. I have a contact with their a man, but I took some data from him, but I don't have many contacts. But I write a research paper. It could be a qualitative research or not. Thank you, sir.
Yes, that's the qualitative research. The danger with that kind of research is that you are collecting information from one side of the conflict, which for researchers, it is extremely dangerous to do that. Because for us researchers, we are not really like the media. You see, the media, when they come here and say, okay, we are from the BBC, what is happening here? You give somebody the microphone, the person tells you what they think is going on, and that is what they bring to the television. For researchers, you can only make a conclusion of your research after getting information from different sources. So even though interviewing one person or two people is still considered as qualitative method, it is not necessarily reliable, or it is not sufficient to only listen to one side or one person group. They will tell you the same thing which they believe in. The other person will also tell you something else. It is your responsibility as a researcher to have good quality information, and good quality information comes from both sides. It is the only way you can succeed as an independent researcher. Unfortunately, as scientists, we don't have sides in the moment you have actually bias in a particular conflict, then you may not be encouraged to conduct that particular research. Okay, so try to get more information, but yes, your information is actually a qualitative method. Yes.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
sir, for your explanation.
Okay, thank you.
I think Abdu was raising a hand earlier. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Abdurrahman 3. Yeah, please, could you go ahead?
Yes.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. And I would like to know, sir, how can we ensure the reliability and validity of our research? That's my question, sir.
Okay, so reliability. As I've said, I think it's closely tied to what I've just said. Reliable research is as good as the data. As I gave the example of Ukraine and Russia. If you go to Ukraine and ask them what is happening here, they will tell you this is an invasion, we are being attacked, all manner of things. If you go to Russia and ask people there what is happening, they will also give you some explanation. So what you need to do as a researcher is to collect information from both parties and then collect a third source, probably from experts who are neutral, who are in the field, probably professors in the field of international relations, people working for international organizations such as the UN or UNHCR, who may be involved in some of the processes that are going on in that country. But even if you don't have that information, try to find some previous cases that have been studied that may look familiar to what is going on now, and extract information from the existing literature and try to fit that information to what you've collected from the ground. Because unfortunately, as I'm saying, the study of conflict and politics, just like politics, if you go and ask people who support a political party whether they think the other party is doing a good job in government, they'll tell you this government is very fake, it's not doing a good job. If you ask supporters of that particular government or the party that is in government whether the government is doing a good job, of course they will tell you this is the best government we have seen. But is this information reliable? The answer is no. It is information you have collected from the ground, but it's not reliable. So you may need to look, okay, what is an effective government? How does an effective government function? So you may check, an effective government is one that is fair to all its citizens, not just favoring those who voted for the government. So you check whether that government is doing that particular activity or not. So in that case, you will have more reliable information. Okay.
Yeah, now I think Abdurrahman, he got the
Yeah,
answer.
thank you, Professor, for your wonderful answer.
Yeah, we have.
Kai, you can take one lucky person, because I need to rush somewhere in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Possible.
please,
But I
serious.
will
Okay,
be
please go
more
ahead.
than happy.
Please. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you again, Professor. So I would like to ask a question. As far as I know that quantitative research is all about mathematical, statistical. It is related about experimental, which we need a laboratory to experiment. It is like that. And qualitative research is all about social science, which is in expression behavior of the people, behavior of the social world, as far as I know. So can we use a mixed method in social science research?
Yes. Actually, increasingly, as I've told you, most studies, including the study of conflict, they insist on even now quantitative approaches. In fact, there are certain theories such as the game theory and other theories of social science that are very much quantitative in nature. And publishers and journals are now interested only in studies that have been conducted using quantitative data. That will inform the kind of questionnaires that you put out. You see, you can actually send questionnaires that are open-ended. You ask the person, okay, what is your opinion about this particular issue? Then the person will answer in one sentence or two, and then you can interpret that answer qualitatively using thematic analysis. But you can also, in this case, ask people questions that can actually produce mathematical answers, which then you can interpret mathematically. So those possibilities are there in social sciences, and they are very common now. So it is possible to use mixed method, but you can only use them if you have the necessary skills required. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, I think.
Maybe one more.
Yeah. Okay, one more. Yeah, I know I'm taking too much time from you. Sorry for that.
No problem. Yeah. Let me take the last two. I can see there's this Mumtaz and Mohammed. Maybe if their answer questions are short, I can respond to those ones again.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, Mumtaz, could you please go ahead, please? Yeah, okay, please go ahead. Yeah, we can get you. Hello?
Cannot get him. Maybe Mohammed can unmute him.
I think he has internet problem. Okay, Aziz, yes. Aziz, please go ahead, Aziz.
Hello.
Yeah, we can get you. Please go ahead.
Jay, thank you for the privilege. Thank you so much, Professor, for the comprehensive and insightful session today. Your explanation were highly clear and incredibly helpful for someone like me who is just starting out in this. I truly appreciate the time and effort you put into sharing your knowledge. Me, as a new researcher, I often struggle to achieve for my research project. Just for a simple example, example, if I have a research question about how community programs affect mental health in refugees, how do I decide between using interviews or surveys? What specific factors should I consider, like the types of information I want to gather or the resources I have? Your guidelines on this could be highly invaluable. Thank you.
Very well. That's a good question. So this is this kind of topic will require you to interview a couple of people. On one hand, you may need to interview the refugees themselves, who are now the victims of these programs. You may need to interview the people who are executing these programs. Let's say they are NGOs, and you may also need to interview some experts in the field of mental health, among other things. So your methodology here will also be guided on or by largely your ability to access, number one, the refugees themselves. Number two, the hospitals maybe where these refugees are going as a result of this, the impact of this. I don't know whether it was a mental health problem. So you may want to interview some of the doctors or counselors that are talking to these refugees to just understand what are they telling them. And then you may also interview the refugees. You may also interview the people who are providing these programs to see whether they are seeing positive or negative effects. So in short, what I'm saying, how networked are you as a researcher? Are you able to access these individuals and get inside information from them? Because sometimes you may go to some office and say, okay, I want to interview the manager here. But if they don't know you, they may not allow you to interview the manager. But if you have some network, some connections, then you may be able to conduct the interview. But yes, this particular study requires you to talk to the people who are part or are being affected by the programs. Yes. I think I don't know whether that is a good response, but we can have another session in the future where we can also respond to some of these questions. Yeah. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes,
Aziz?
Professor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no problem. I don't know where Kai has gone to. He can close the session for us.
I think now, yeah. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Nyaburi. I know you're busy, and thank you so much for your times. I know that we took too much time from you, and it was a very wonderful presentations. And thank you so much for sharing your insights and long-term experience, of course, about the research. Of course, as let me to share to my students about you. This Dr. Nyaburi. I mean, these persons I meet first time in Turkey, so he always guided us, and they also some students along with me, that, and what we need to do and how can complete our masters and how we can write a good paper is the ones who always guided us. So thank you so much for everything. Actually, this presentation was very good, very informative, and very informative, and of course, and I believe that all of the students, they gained a lot of knowledge, and we appreciate your times, your support, your willingness, and solidarity with the Rohingya peoples. And of course, you have been engaged in, of course, conducting the research, especially on Rohingya crisis. And thank you so much for everything. Yeah, I think now since we have no more questions, I think we can wrap up the question sections. Thanks again for everything.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it has been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.